Welcome to Rainmakers. Normally we're talking with people who come from organizations that only work on the global stage. Well, tonight's guest works in both, locally here in the United States and globally. Marty Kooistra from Habitat for Humanity. Marty, welcome to the show.
Hey Stan, great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
You know, Habitat for Humanity has been one of my favorite organizations forever, it seems. So, I'm thrilled to have someone who can tell us about how the organization works.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. You know, that forever goes way back to 1976 when the organization was really founded, and founded by Millard and Linda Fuller on the principles of really reconciliation. And we've been working since around the globe, as you say, but here in King County is where I've been for the last 4 years, and we have a lot of good things going on.
For those of us, so those of our viewers who are not from King County is Seattle, Washington, where I live as well. And there's some great things happening here in King County, but likely they're happening in your areas too. And even if you don't live in the United States, they could be happening in your community too. I want to get right to it. The vision of all Habitat for Humanity organizations around the world is a world where everyone has a decent place to live. Got to ask you, is that a realistic vision?
Wow, sounds a little audacious, doesn't it?
Just a little.
You know, again, going back to our founder, he wanted to stretch everyone's imagination and really did believe, as many of us do, that we can solve the problem of affordable housing. The question is, do we have the will and the commitment to do it? And Habitat as an organization, Stan, now we're saying we're starting a new home every 10 minutes somewhere around the world. That's a pretty fascinating phenomenon. The reality is we're only 96,000 houses a day short, according to urban migration issues, the natural disasters that are happening. And so it is a big, hairy, audacious goal, but it is one we believe that we need to keep holding out in front of our entire country and the world to say we can do it.
I got to ask you this. The last several years has been very difficult for the housing industry, very difficult for the mortgage industry, very difficult for people in general. How has Habitat been able to basically even stay alive through these very difficult times in the industry that you're involved in?
It's a great question. Actually, our primary supporters, our traditional supporters, are from those industries most heavily decimated by what happened with our housing crisis. On the other hand, we tend to also think about opportunity. And for us, we have stayed the course, in fact, increased our productivity here in Northwest Washington simply by morphing our program and being responsive. We are now buying and renovating real estate owned or foreclosed properties and turning those around and selling them to qualified Habitat buyers, thereby working in the distressed neighborhoods, stabilizing those neighborhoods, going out and doing owner-occupied repair for families who can't take care of their homes through normal channels. And so really, instead of talking about building Habitat houses, today we talk about creating housing opportunities, really serving families. Well,
I noticed that the strategic goal for 2011 to 2014 is to make a lasting positive contribution to neighborhood revitalization efforts, provide housing solutions to more households locally and globally, and ensure Habitat's sustained relevance.
Yeah.
That's a new goal.
Yeah.
So at the time you wrote that, you know that neighborhoods had fallen down.
There were some that were definitely vulnerable due to the crisis and the lending practices. There are also some that have been vulnerable and distressed for some time. And Habitat as an organization, especially in the U.S., has come to realize that place matters. And you can put someone in a new home in an environment, though, where no social mobility may occur. And so, yes.
What does that mean?
It means essentially, Stan, the things you and I look for when we're trying to find a place to live. Is it viable? Is there vitality there? Am I close and proximate to work? Are there services there that I can obtain? Is it safe? Is it free from crime and the things that would prohibit us from enjoying life in a neighborhood?
You said a moment ago, you talked about a qualified Habitat buyer.
Yes.
What is that?
So Habitat for Humanity not only works on the product side, houses, we also have a lending product. And so we create loans for low-income households, and those loans are made available at 0%. that means that we function also as a lender, not just a builder. And so we go through a process of qualifying people who want to get a loan through Habitat for Humanity based on their need, their ability to repay that loan, and their willingness to partner with us. There's a sweat equity requirement, an investment there, some training that goes along with it, and just being willing to be put out in front of the public to say, hey, I need some help.
Are you in competition with private home builders?
Love that question. We get it frequently. The truth is we're serving families who cannot get lending through the formal sector. So I like to say to people, if that's your perspective, flip it upside down, because you don't get move-up buyers unless you have entry-level people. And so what we're really trying to do is create a pipeline of folks. And to us, a habitat intervention, a housing opportunity, is not an end state. It may be a plateau for a family. And so if their situation changes and they can move out of their habitat home, we feel that's success.
How long do they have to own the home before they can sell it?
They will retain a second mortgage, we call it, that's in silent position for about 20 years. And that's there just to protect the differential value from what it's really worth and what we might sell it to them for, because we don't charge a profit. Here in the Seattle market, there's also a shared appreciation agreement. And if the value of that home does increase when the housing market comes back and they do need to sell, we have a mechanism for recapturing some of that appreciation so we can serve more households.
Okay, so there is a sustainability aspect for Habitat for Humanity. And at the same point in time, there is some value that is built by the homeowner.
It's that balance between asset building and perpetuating affordability. And because it costs so much in these urban markets to produce a unit or to renovate one, we definitely have to look at how we preserve those resources.
It costs more in an urban market than in a rural market?
The land costs are usually the most prohibiting factor.
Now, let's go to an urban market, Detroit.
Yeah.
We know, as we saw on the news, that in Detroit there were whole neighborhoods that were foreclosed upon and basically abandoned.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're even bulldozing some houses and have done that.
Yes.
It would seem like the land values would be kind of low there. Is that a prime place for Habitat for Humanity to be?
We are very active in Detroit. In fact, I've led what we call blitz builds in Detroit over the years.
Oh, that sounds fun. What's a blitz build?
Well, it's like we basically defy gravity and accelerate the process down to 5 days or 12 days, or in some cases I build houses in 24 hours. It's just primarily a way to draw attention to the fact that we can do this. But Detroit, as an example, interesting example, the challenge you have when you think about, okay, opportunity for land, yes, but that's only one component of livelihood. And so if there isn't a mechanism available for families to be able to afford, through gainful employment, making a mortgage payment, what have you done? And so that is really the complexity of an urban issue like a Detroit. Right now, they're faced with turning off utility to certain parts of the community simply because there are not enough users to justify the costs of the city to run them. And so you're seeing a regression back to farmland in a place that once was a vibrant part of the industrial complex.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's got to be tough for the city planners. I mean, what do you do next? Probably shrink.
Yeah, I think the reality there is, what is our planning that looks at a way of consolidation and still having, some kind of vibrancy for families that want to live there.
I'm going to ask you a very stereotypical question because I know a lot of landlords. Yeah. And landlords who own single-family houses oftentimes feel like that they have to educate tenants on how to take care of a house. Do you have to do that same thing with new homeowners?
The responsibility that comes along with owning is not a lot different than the responsibility anyone should have when they are part of a community. The challenge is how do I get ownership of that responsibility? There's no doubt that we believe it's very important to provide a lot of training and workshops and orientation to getting to know what it's going to take to own a home. frankly, not every one of us should, or not all of us may want to own a home. I mean, once you do, you begin to realize that, hey, this thing requires an awful lot of work.
Yeah, whenever there's a repair needed in my house, I sure wish I could call the landlord. But I can't.
Exactly, no, that's right. I mean, the famous architect Bill McDonough once said, hey, Marty, realize this, all of the materials we use when we're building houses are trying to return to their natural origin. So homeowner maintenance is really an intervention in a natural process. But that aside, yes, I mean, the stereotypes are interesting too, though, because in fact, you do find people who, through the sweat equity incentive, gathering that ownership, will actually tell you when you come to visit them, take your shoes off at the door, because they have a piece of that in their lives, are invested. And so we believe that there is a value add to ownership when it works for families to create that sort of incentive around, this is mine, I can help take care of this and my community.
As part of the strategic goals, we talked about provide housing solutions to more households locally and globally, but it was geared towards neighborhood revitalization efforts. That sounds almost like government policy to me. Have governments, local and maybe even national, come to Habitat and said, help us?
There is a growing sense that Habitat is emerging from what I used to call an isolationist kind of operation to one that's more integrated and catalytic. And really that evolution comes from the recognition that, number one, we have a real gift because of the volunteerism, the community engagement piece of Habitat. We are magnetizing a group of people in society that are not necessarily engaged otherwise in housing and poverty issues. And so sometimes, though we articulate the value of volunteerism purely as people having a great time helping build houses, doing something good for their community, it's also an opportunity for us to open up avenues of awareness and education about why we exist to begin with. Because if you go to the depths of it, Stan, you could argue that a community should be embarrassed that it has a Habitat affiliate, because it's saying that something isn't working. And so if that's the case, what are we going to do with the value add of Habitat? And that's where the public sector says, look, if you're drawing in resources from the faith community and the private sector to augment and leverage public dollars, you're a value add, okay? Mm-hmm. If you're another organization, though, that's coming in and competing for the same public dollars to say, we're going to do something, you know, what's really happening there? I think that, coupled with the statistics and the data out there that say home ownership is really something that does have an impact on the lives of a family. It impacts teen pregnancy rates. It impacts school dropout rates. It has a direct impact on the stability of a family. That goes to the core of how do I protect the fabric of a neighborhood. And that's really why we believe revitalization or a focus on neighborhood transformation is key.
Does revitalization mean rehab of houses too?
Yeah, so for us there's a product mix there, right? It's repairing existing homes that families own, and for some reason they might not be able to get that roof done on there. The cost is beyond their means. It's rehabbing existing structures, and if there's infill lots that need new construction, yes. But it's tying in training opportunities, leadership development opportunities, working on playgrounds and public areas, neighborhood cleanup days. And here we take it a step further. We are also engaging at-risk youth in job skills training on our job sites down in Federal Way. We've got a cohort of 15 young people that are either homeless or formerly homeless or at risk of being homeless themselves, who are learning the construction trades. And so it's a comprehensive way of looking at how does the shelter or housing piece fit into a healthy neighborhood.
You know, if I'm sitting here listening to you and watching the show, and I happen to be heading up a mortgage banking unit of a bank here in the area, I'm thinking, I'm going to call that guy because I need some help. Do banks call?
Yeah, so we have a great relationship with the mortgage lenders from a variety of perspectives, but also we are buying up their foreclosed properties right now. And
I was going to ask you about that because I think you talk about poverty and home ownership, but all of the foreclosed properties, and especially in the Seattle area, weren't in blighted neighborhoods.
Yeah, so there are neighborhoods, of course, where the values have not decreased, thankfully. There are neighborhoods of opportunity, we call them, where sales are staying strong because that's where families want to live. There are parts of Seattle, though, southeast Seattle, where there are neighborhoods and areas where they're less desirable. We're finding foreclosed units there that we're working in partnership with the Homestead Community Land Trust, Wells Fargo, and the city of Seattle, and doing a public-private nonprofit component where Habitat's not involved in the lending. There's a case where we're just doing the rehab work and bringing our community engagement structure to do that. And so throughout South County, though, there are quite a few foreclosed homes that meet our criteria.
So does the Habitat for Humanity in this area, this wonderful area here where I live in Seattle,
Yes.
Does it work pretty much the same way across the country?
There is a movement around the country to recognize the need to get into catalytic activities. There are a number of affiliates that are part of this revitalization initiative pilot that are looking at ways to diversify their product line away from what people think we are as just a house builder. And I think by and large in the urban markets there's a need to understand partnerships and alliances. And really from our international work, our global work, the idea of being a collaborative partner has been far stronger than in the United States. We're really lagging behind in terms of how we operate in many of the countries around the world.
Well, okay. I want to get to the global work, and so we'll
Sure.
just jump right into that right now.
Yeah.
What do you do that's different outside the United States that's perhaps in a what I call an impact country?
So, you know, by and large, you start with the fact that housing costs significantly less. You have some very similar challenges. I mean, urban core issues outside the U.S., what we call settlements, human settlements, or what some folks call slums, are laden with some of the same challenges you have trying to get land, secure tenure to land. You know, and finding stability for families near where there's work. I mean, I was just in Cambodia in November with a group of folks. We built 22 houses in Adong, about 90 miles out of Phnom Penh. We did it in 4 days, and it was...
You built 22 houses in 4 days?
Yes, there was about 300 people that gathered from around the world, but it was an orchestrated blitz, and...
No kidding.
Yeah, but, you know...
I think the Packers would like you.
Yeah, but the families were living on a dump site, right? $1 or $2 a day was their source of revenue. Now, the challenge you have, though, is, okay, we moved 90 miles or 90 minutes away to Adong. If there's no livelihood there, though, those families we know will eventually vacate those homes and they'll end up back. And so there's an urban or a farm that we've created that's part of that whole establishment in Odong, so families can find livelihood there. And there's a community center where there's opportunities for doing small businesses and things like that. And so you couple the interventions really with something that's more holistic. Where is the livelihood going to come from? And that's by and large our focus is partnering with allies around the world to find ways in which our housing solutions can have an impact. And not in all cases is it building new. I mean, a lot of water and sanitation stuff, technical assistance and training, building and training centers. I mean, if you give me a minute, I'll tell you a little bit about Nicaragua. Shortly before I moved out here, my role at headquarters was Senior Director of Global Program Design, and we were studying Nicaragua for a long time. Why did our program not thrive there the way it did in some of the other Central American countries? Well, I start this country assessment process with a few folks, and we learned early on through looking at the policy framework and the housing conditions that 82% of the housing in Nicaragua was already self-help housing. So we were parachuting in the old way of thinking about Habitat, which is let's bring in more self-help housing. We were creating a competitive environment that was going nowhere. So totally switch up the program. You get a building and training center that provides technical assistance, links families to where they can get support for learning how to build disaster proof design, building and savings programs, microcredit, all of those pieces, and we're doing a whole lot more good now as an ally and a partner as opposed to being an isolated group.
Man, I thought that to be able to volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, all I needed to do is be able to hammer a nail. That seems a little more than that.
We love to have folks come out and pound nails with us.
And I'm not saying I'm really good at that.
Come on now, let's give it a shot. Come on out sometime. But no, I mean, people from all walks of life. We need folks on our board of directors who understand the complexity of housing, understand complexity of lending, but also committed people that will work to help find and train buyers. All of these pieces, raise money, whatever it is. So nobody has to feel like they can't participate.
There is a movement that's going on in business that's almost a merger of for-profit and not-for-profit. And what I'm hearing out of you with regard to Habitat for Humanity is that it's truly more of a social enterprise than it is a traditional nonprofit.
In many respects, yes. And we diversified recent years in another way in the United States, where we've created these what we call restores, or here in the Washington market we call them habitat stores. And that's where we're taking surplus and salvage building materials and recycling it essentially back into the stream. And it's a job creation piece as well, because we've got at-risk adults here on East Marginal Way, folks who are immigrants, refugees, whatever, getting job skills training. And the immigrant population right now in Washington State is finding a 44% success rate in getting jobs. They graduate out of our program there at what we call building resilience at our store, and we're up to 66% success rate. So,
well, congratulations.
Just by offering the platform, so to speak, to the community, and that's done through partner agencies as well.
If I were an individual and just wanted to volunteer, did I call you up and say, hey, put me to work?
You can call us. It seems a little bit like we're moving away from that. If you go to the website, of course, hit the button.
Yeah, we're getting the website up on the screen. So.
And it takes you to our database system, and all the volunteer opportunities are there. You can pick and choose. Come to an orientation if you want. You can do an online orientation, or hey, give us a call and we're happy to sit down.
Let's say we're a very smart company and I wanted to have a team building exercise for my company. Should I call Habitat and say, hey, what do we do? And what would the response be?
Yeah, so we would look at, okay, do you want a Saturday, you want a Friday, you want a weekday, whatever. We find you a location where we're doing a project, match up the size of your group. And we would ask that you go to your HR department and talk about some of the soft skills you want coming out of that team building, because I don't have the capacity to deliver that. But what I give you is again, a platform. You've got a problem to solve. There's tools, piles of lumber, a blueprint. Hey, diffuse your leadership structure. Everybody's all on the same plane. You get out there, have a sub sandwich for lunch, but in the meantime, learn a lot about each other and really learn about how we can all be effective in making a difference.
Now, somebody on the job site needs to know what they're doing.
Yes, sir.
That's not going to come from, let's say, a company where everybody sits behind, sits on a desk the whole time.
Well, we should be careful. There's a lot of closet carpenters hiding behind desks. But,
okay.
But I got you.
I am not one.
Yeah. Site supervisors, we put professionals on all our job sites.
Okay.
And stand
now,
out.
are they volunteers too, or are they paid?
No, they're paid. And we have some volunteers, ironically, that will lead a house as well. There is all kinds of folks out there, but most of our construction sites have paid supervision, and we are also very committed to green and sustainability standards. We have built LEED Silver projects. We're right now building LEED Gold product here in Seattle. Our focus is really on trying to, again, knock down that stereotype that someone says, hey, volunteers, they must be building low quality or cheap housing.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we consider what we do to be impactfully moving through society, saying if Habitat, a nonprofit, can build that way, why can't the rest of us?
Can I ask you this? If you're going into a neighborhood that's in the process of revitalizing itself,
Yeah.
do you purposely make sure that you build a house that's commensurate with the neighborhood, rather than building up or building down?
Yeah, so the key is, I mean, in the Seattle market, there are so many design considerations that need to be taken care of. But wherever we go now, and I think this is a growing understanding around the United States, may not have been there in the early years. Let's look at the vernacular of the neighborhood. Let's respect that, and let's try to identify a structure that we can put there that actually blends in such a way that no one would ever identify it as a Habitat house.
Now, let me flip this onto the other side. Let's say that I work for a company and I happen to know some people who've been through some hard times.
Yeah.
They lost their house, but they're going to make it if they get a little bit of help.
Yeah.
And maybe they could be a Habitat buyer. Is that the kind of people you might be interested in?
There's no doubt. I mean, again, going to the website, there's a whole list of menu opportunities there for folks who are seeking services of some kind. We like to channel everyone here in Seattle to the Washington Homeownership Resource Center to start with, because it's important to understand through intake and assessment what their needs really are. And because we can only serve a limited number of families with that 0% mortgage, we try to make sure, though, that we're channeling everybody to the right solution as quickly as possible. And getting them into that intake process gives them a counselor that can work with them.
When I was on the website preparing for the show, I didn't realize this about Habitat for Humanity. I probably should have, but it's a faith-based organization, isn't it?
It is. The heritage and the roots, if you go way back, started really at a place called Koinonia Farms, where a man by the name of Clarence Jordan was running a kind of an experimental farm just outside of Americus, Georgia. Clarence came from a Christian roots background. Millard Fuller met him. There was a whole lot of stuff that happened, but really Millard and Linda, his wife, went to Zaire, Africa. That's where Habitat was born, on the segregated strip of Bendaka. That's where the concept of self-help housing and Habitat emerged. And we came back and we started the organization in '76 in a chicken coop at Koinonia Farm. And that root, those heritage components created the faith identity of Habitat. It's also important, though, to recognize that it was never designed to be a gate or a wall to keep people out of the organization. You do not have to be a Christian to be on the board of a Habitat affiliate. You don't have to be a Christian to buy a Habitat house. The vast majority of people that are buying homes with us here in Seattle come from other faiths. And so the movement is intended to hold strong to the values that come from those traditional roots. But at the same time, it's not intended to prohibit anybody who wants to be involved with working with us.
Unfortunately, we only have 10 seconds left, so I've got to ask you this. What's been your best moment in all of your years at Habitat?
I would have to say it's those moments where those homeowners look at you and they say, wow, you know, life is good, and we think we can make it.
Marty Kooistra, Habitat for Humanity, thank you very much.
Stan, thank you.